AFA at the Core podcast are available at afr.net. Back to AFA at the Core on American Family Radio.
Politics in the state of Mississippi, and nationally for that matter, are at best crooked. And that's why you need someone who's real, who's raw, who calls it correctly.
Who's real, who's raw? Politics in Mississippi. Well, that wasn't really a banner ad, but you know what? That's the kind of thing that you have to be bold about when you're a Christian activist. And on the line right now is Stephen Utroska. How are you doing, Stephen?
Doing good, Fred. How are you?
Did I pronounce that right, Utroska?
You got it right on the money.
Yeah, I figured that's Irish or Scottish or something like that, is it?
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. It's actually a Prussian Polak.
Good to have you with us. Well, listen, you are currently the state director for Mississippi at the State Freedom Caucus Network. Tell us a little bit more about that and what you're all about in the way of, could I say maybe irritating from time to time lawmakers in Mississippi?
Sure. Yeah, we absolutely do that. So the State Freedom Caucus Network was really launched out of the idea of the U.S. House Freedom Caucus. So, there were 9 members in the U.S. House that launched Freedom Caucus back in 2015, and they have been the thorn in the side of the establishment Republicans in D.C. since then. Of course, we just saw just a couple of weeks ago 20 of those members standing up and fighting for new rules in the U.S. House that would bring a lot of order back to the members. And so they are continuing to do that fight in D.C., but we saw that model and said we need to bring this to the states. Of course, the states is where it all starts. We believe in the power of the states and the 10th Amendment. And so we launched this back in December of 21. Georgia was the first state to join the Freedom Caucus Network. Mississippi, my home state here, it was the second to join in January of last year. So just a little over a year ago, Mississippi joined. We now have 10 states across the country that have Freedom Caucuses that have launched in their states and joined the network so that they are doing what we see in the U.S. House of Representatives with the Freedom Caucus there. They are now doing that in the states. We have 10 as of now. Our goal is to have another 10 to 15 by the end of this year. And if we can reach the goal of, the higher goal of 15, we'll basically have half the states with the most, conservative, constitutional-minded Christian conservatives in state legislatures throughout the country fighting for our values.
All right, folks across the country saw what happened in the debate over picking a leader as the Republicans took over the House there in the last couple of weeks. We saw that it went 15 rounds before the leader was finally chosen. And as you mentioned, these 20 of the Freedom Caucus, and what they were pointing to, they held back on allowing Kevin to become the House leader because they said they didn't want the status quo. And really their focus was the Republican Party, not Democrats. They believed that their Republicans had become part of the swamp or whatever the case may be, going along too easily with the Democrat Party agenda. So is it the goal of the Freedom Caucus to try to reform the Republican Party or perhaps bring it back to what it was?
Yeah, so I work for the network, not specifically the U.S. House Freedom Caucus.
Sure.
But it is our goal, in the network to have members of the state legislatures to bring back their legislatures to Christian conservative, constitutional conservative ideals. So here in Mississippi, we have been, supermajority Republican state since 2011. So over 10 years now, more than a decade, we have had Republican control of our state House and state Senate. And we, have all 8 of our statewide elected officials are Republicans. We have, Republicans are everywhere in Mississippi, but we constantly have a fight with leadership on actually getting conservative legislation passed. You would think with a supermajority of Republicans in a state like Mississippi, we should be as red as one could get. But if you look at scorecards like the American Conservative Union scorecard, which, ACU is who puts on CPAC, If you look at their scorecard for Mississippi, for our state legislature, we're a purple state. There's absolutely no reason why we should be a purple state based on our state legislature if we have Republicans everywhere. So it is our caucus's goal, in the states and the network to support those caucuses in the states to make sure that we hold Republicans to the values for which they espouse. We are a nonpartisan organization, but our values line up more with the Republican Party. And so if you look at their platform of what they say they believe in, when they campaign what they say they believe in, that's what we want to hold them to. We want to make sure that they are continuing to uphold their promises made during campaign season, but we rarely see that. And so we want to make sure we are telling not only our members who are fighting in the state legislature, but telling the grassroots, the people who voted, the constituents, we want to make sure they are aware of what's going on in our state capitol, because it's all too easy for them to vote come election time and then to not get involved in politics or not follow what's going on in the state legislature. So we just want to bring that to light.
All right, we're talking with Stephen Utroska, and he is the state director for Mississippi at the State Freedom Caucus Network. Now, you just mentioned there you want to bring forward conservative legislation. Can you give us some examples of the kind of things that your group is striving for that you want to become law in the state of Mississippi?
Yeah, so the Mississippi Freedom Caucus came out this year. They published a 2023 legislative agenda of the things they want to work on. Certainly, we're in the post Roe v. Wade generation now. Mississippi, that came out of Mississippi, the Dobbs decision. Myself and our officers from the Mississippi Freedom Caucus just happened to be in D.C. when that decision came down. So we were at the Supreme Court when it came down. And we know that in light of that, we know that there are many people out there who are going to be pushing things like Medicaid expansion in Mississippi to try to say that that's a solution to the problems that we have created through not allowing abortion. Some of our members were part of the authorship for that bill, for the Dobbs decision bill, and we'll continue to support that in Mississippi. We no longer have any abortion clinics in Mississippi, but we have to look at what we can do in that, whether that's cutting red tape for adoption, trying to allow people an easier route to adopt, cutting down on the expenses from the government side of that. But also we want to fight Medicaid expansion. Medicaid expansion is not the answer to that. So we'll be working on that. We always want to fight with government overspending, government overtaxing. So we fought last year for the income tax elimination bill that came out. Of course, it ultimately resulted in a income tax reduction, not a full elimination. But the state right now, Mississippi and many states across the country, are flush with cash, and there's absolutely no reason in a Republican-held state like Mississippi we can't do a full elimination. The numbers work out. We've looked at the data. The policy of it works out. So we'll be fighting for that to try to get a full elimination. We want to continue to work in voter integrity bills. Last year, Mississippi passed a bill that did very little. It was certainly celebrated by many on the right as being a transformative bill, things we're doing to protect our elections. We don't think it went far enough, so we've introduced a bill this year, the Mississippi Freedom Caucus has, to try to make sure we protect our elections. If we cannot protect our elections, then we will lose our republic. That is, one of the core values of our country and our state, to have secure elections. So we'll continue to introduce legislation to make sure we can protect those and we have secure elections. We're going to continue to fight against any kind of Second Amendment violations. People think in Mississippi, because we are a fairly free state when it comes to Second Amendment, to our gun protection laws, that we don't have anything to worry about. But there's a lot of federal bills coming down, that federal funding bills that have gun control stipulations with those. So if we see any federal funding that comes down that has any gun control legislation slipped into it, we want to make sure as a state we push back from the federal government for those overreaches. We also want to fight against the ESGs. ESG is a very difficult topic to tell the grassroots to explain that, but it's basically state taking state dollars, our tax dollars, and investing that into woke corporations, corporations that believe in climate change, the Green New Deal type things, the Paris Climate Accord type things, investing in businesses, that is their main production or goal. And we want to make sure that any of our state dollars, whether that's our tax dollars being invested in those funds or our state retirees, their pension fund from the state being invested in those, we want to make sure that is not being done. The state treasurer has come out and supported us in that. And so we hope to continue to fight that.
Wow. Busy agenda. And looking at some of the background material, I noticed a lovely wife. You have 2 kids, little boy, little girl?
I do. Absolutely. They're 5 and 6.
5 and 6. Well, obviously, as a parent, as a Christian parents, what do you think about the state of education and what the government is doing for education options in Mississippi?
Yeah, so that's a huge topic across the country, educational freedom. That's certainly one of our primary goals that we want to fight for across the country in the network. We're urging our state caucuses to fight in that. Mississippi, because of the chairman that we have in the House, he is anti-school choice, anti-educational freedom. We have not had any kind of educational freedom come out of Mississippi since like 2016, I think was the last time. We may have had some slight ones, but no big reforms since then. And it doesn't look like we're going to get anything this year. We'll continue to fight for it. I homeschool my own kids. I believe in freedom of Christians, especially to be able to educate our children apart from the state, apart from the government. Pastor Vody Bacham, one of my favorite pastors, he said, and I'm paraphrasing this some, but we can't continue sending our kids to Caesar and be surprised when they come home as Romans. And I believe that. I think that we should have choice. If we're putting money, we're being taxed to pay for education. I think that parents should have the right to decide and determine where that money is spent for their child to get an education.
All right, Stephen, you're very much involved, very much engaged in trying to bring these changes about. I'm going to give you a minute or so that we have left here to talk to people who are listening right now, not only in Mississippi, but across the country, because the kinds of things that you've been talking about the last few moments, I know are on the minds of a lot of our listeners across the country. So what can individuals do? What can moms and dads do? I'm thinking about what happened up in Loudoun County in Virginia when parents found out what was going on in their schools. They didn't just complain. They got involved. So I want to give you a couple of minutes just to encourage people as to how they can get involved.
Absolutely. Yeah, so if you're in Mississippi, you can go to freedomcaucus.ms. That is our Mississippi Freedom Caucus's website. You can sign on to their newsletter. They send out a newsletter usually twice per week during session, once per week off session, to let you know what's going on in our state and country. If you're not in Mississippi, go to statefreedomcaucus.org. That is our website for the network. You can find your state there. If you don't have a Freedom Caucus in your state yet, reach out to us. You can go on the website there and contact us and let us know that you want one in your state. Again, we've got 10 that are lined up already this year that we want to launch. We've got 10 already on board, but you have to get involved. We have to do this from the ground up with grassroots. We will never win back our country and turn our country around if people do not get involved. Mississippi, it's an election year this year. We have an odd year election year, 2023. I encourage you to get out, support candidates who believe in our Christian conservative values, who believe in the Constitution, and will continue to fight for what our founders believed in when they started our country and our states. So get out, fight, and don't let things go, or they will continue to go down if you do not get involved.
Stephen Utroska has been our guest, State Director for Mississippi at the State Freedom Caucus Network. Give us the website once again where folks can go and get some more information.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're in Mississippi, go to freedomcaucus.ms. That's for the Mississippi Freedom Caucus. Or go to statefreedomcaucus.org. That is for the network, so you can find all the states that were within the network.
All right, Stephen Utroska, thank you so much. We appreciate what you're doing. Thank you for your leadership on these fronts, and we hope that others, not only in Mississippi, but others across the country will get activated because, Stephen, I'm just thinking about this. This is what liberals have been so good at over the last number of decades, which is why they've kind of taken over the education system and media and that sort of thing. But Christians, I think, are waking up.
Absolutely. absolutely. And I hope they will continue to wake up.
Yeah. Stephen, thank you so much. We appreciate you coming on with us.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me.
All right. Stephen Utroska, leader and activist here in Mississippi and the state director for Mississippi at the State Freedom Caucus.